Welcome, everybody. My name is Lindsey Shaktman. I am a lead planner and designer with Maven House Events. We are so happy to have you all here for our photography version of our Ask Maven House webinar series. So just really thank you so much for joining today. Again, my name is Lindsey. I am based in New England, specifically Portland, Maine, and I service our destination clients throughout, the New England area and the United States. We are, of course, planners all throughout New England, Boston, North Shore of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York City. We have New Hampshire, planners everywhere, and of course also down growing into Charleston, South Carolina, which is very fitting for today's conversation and our guest today. So we'll just kick off. So today I'm so excited and so thrilled to formally introduce Clay Austin, our special guest. Clay is a Charleston-based destination wedding photographer, but travels everywhere, which is so key to my heart and my travel bug. He shoots weddings, engagements, editorial, all sorts of different fun, beautiful things. He's been featured in many publications like Vogue, Style Me Pretty, Martha Stewart Weddings. And we're really just going to dive into Clay's work, his experience, his advice. So today is, of course, meant to be a very immersive experience. So please, if you have questions, let's use the chat box. We're all here. We're all part of this. So again, we want to provide as much information as possible. So with that, Clay, I'd love for you to kind of introduce yourself a bit.
Sure. Yeah. So I am Clay Austin. Like Lindsey said, I'm based here in Charleston, South Carolina, which as we speak is getting to be just as close to the heat of Africa as I would like to get to. So it's starting to heat up, which makes me even more excited to kind of break out and travel a bit this summer. So like Lindsey said, I do travel for a good chunk of my weddings. So a lot of them are here too in Charleston, just because of the nature of how massive the Charleston market is for weddings. I've been doing this now for, I want to say about 9 years, which has been a great roller coaster of highs and lows and ups and downs and all the couples in between. So it's been a great experience, and I'm glad to have been able to meet people such as you, Lindsey, and Maven House and everywhere in between. So that's kind of like the long and short of it. So yeah, I'm excited to answer any questions and dive into anything photography related or photography planner related. So yeah, I'm happy to help out.
Great. Awesome. Okay. Well, why don't we start off with, obviously photography is such a key part of the wedding day and the wedding weekend. I know for me, I really, right after we find a venue, I start talking to my clients about photography and, booking a photographer out, because I say to people all the time, a caterer could probably do 2 or 3 weddings in one day. A photographer can do 1. So, you've really got to book your photographer early. So let's start with a little conversation on like insights of just finding your photographer. Then we'll work into kind of like best practices and just tips and tricks throughout, the journey of photography for the wedding day. Sure. So I think even before that, even before you get to the wedding day, you have engagements and all these, proposals and different shoots. And I think a really fun way to get started is I want to do a quick little share my screen moment and talk about Clay's experience doing a proposal shoot just a little while ago. So, yeah. Which you may have seen on Instagram because it went a little viral. It was a very cool moment. It's such beautiful photos. So tell us about this, Clay.
A lot to unpack here. So basically, London, who's the one on the right in the darker hair, she hired me it's funny because like me and the other photographer were looking back in our emails, and she hired me back in January. So this whole thing kind of catalyst started back in January. The idea was that she wanted to propose to her girlfriend on this sailing charter that she had kind of hired out. And they were going to do this sail around the Charleston Harbor. And we had the whole plan about how she was going to ask me to take a picture on their phone. And then after I do that, that was like my cue to kind of pick up my actual camera and then take pictures as she proposes. And as we're talking throughout the month, she's like, Olivia, her now fiance, is like, she is being very nosy and like may like they've I guess talked about the idea of getting married and getting proposed to or engaged, whatever, for a while. So I kind of like jokingly said, like, what if she proposes to you before this happens? And she was like, she might, I don't know. So it
Who
was always like
knows?
that. This might happen both ways, kind of like
Yeah.
in the mix. So the day comes and I'm walking down to the dock, and like I see the captain is walking up like I guess you could call it gangplank. That seems too piratey, but I'm gonna
It's a
say
little piratey, but the dock.
And the captain's walking up to me and I'm like, hey, like my name is Clay. I'm here to photograph a proposal that's happening on your boat. And she was like, we already have a photographer. And I was like, what?
What?
She's like, yeah, there's that girl down there on the boat. Like she's here to photograph the proposal. I was like, wait, why? Like, I
And
thought
you're
I
like,
was
I have been talking about this for months.
yeah.
I know I'm here.
So like I walked down, and as I get closer, like I recognize the photographer. Her name is Chelsea. She's awesome. She's here in Charleston too. And I was like, Chelsea, what the hell are you doing? And she's like, what the hell are you doing? And then we all kind of like at the same
You're like,
time put
wait.
together that we're all there, are hired each by each of them to photograph the proposal that's basically going to happen at the same time.
Yeah.
So we both like put on like these boating shirts to kind of like blend in as the crew, which like this boat was pretty small. It's like there don't need to be 3 people sailing this tiny boat. So like if they knew anything about sailing, they'd be like, this is weird if there's like
They'd be like, we're on like a larger like crew to passenger ratio here.
So like me and Chelsea are in the back, like pretending to know literally anything about sailing, just hoping they just don't ask us any questions, just like kind of looking at the back, like not making any eye contact.
Yeah.
And then we kind of come around the harbor and she puts up the sail. And then London like comes to me, asked me to do the thing that we had kind of rehearsed, like to take a picture of them. I put my camera down, or put her phone down, and then she goes to propose, and I pull my camera, and so does Chelsea. So now there's 2 photographers shooting the exact same thing. So they have their moment, and then as soon as London is done proposing, Olivia takes out her ring and starts proposing to London. They both just like their heads basically explode in front of us.
Everyone's, yeah.
And then they kind of like, after like all that, the dust kind of settles, they both look at us and realize there's 2 photographers taking pictures of them, and they kind of all like the pieces start to get put together at that point. And it was like the funniest, like the most like beautiful, and just like everything. It was like the most amazing and serendipitous experience I think I've ever had. So
I
it's also
am
like a true
absolutely
testament
obsessed.
to them. Like they had this big Charleston vacation that obviously like London, they both were planning on proposing, but I just thought it was like so amazing. They both chose this exact same time. Like they could have done it at any other time, really. But like they both had this idea, like on the boat is when it's going to be the best. So.
Yeah, I mean, and that they both hired the photographer, which I think is key because they both recognize the importance of photography.
Yeah.
And I think that it's so funny and just like you said, like serendipitous. I think it's so beautiful for their story that like obviously they are so connected that they knew like this moment would be like on this sailboat in Charleston, a moment that they both would love to propose, and they did it.
Yeah, and it also kind of worked out because like they both had the idea that this is going to happen at the same time.
Right.
So they both were able to like look good, which I feel like
get ready. Yes.
Proposals, like I don't do a ton of proposals, but like the one person who doesn't know they're being proposed to obviously is not prepared. So like they might be wearing sweatpants or whatever. So they're both like dressed perfectly, hair is all done.
I feel like you always hear these stories where it's like, okay, like I don't want to leave the home right now. Like, no, like, okay, I'm just gonna wear these like old overalls and all these things. And so I saw this, I loved it. I think it's so fun and so beautiful.
Yeah. So best of luck to them. They were awesome. So
yeah. So
I'm glad that like got the traction that it did and kind of shown some really awesome, beautiful moments. So yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah. And also just like tangentially, I think it's fun to know, like, I feel like people get so wrapped up in like a proposal season and they're like, oh, well, like, I don't know, like it's proposal season and then it's wedding season. And like this proposal happened during your like stereotypical wedding season. And I think that's just nice. We do have some questions in here. So what was the explanation of being on the boat? Like, was this just part of their vacation? Do you know?
So London hired the boat, which is kind of funny too. Like Olivia also chose that as a moment. Like she
Right.
kind of like hijacked it a little bit. Like
Yeah.
she like so I guess to answer the question, like, was it like what our role was on the boat? Because we
No,
were
like I guess to each other, but like if they knew it was an open, like, oh hey, like we're going to Charleston and we booked this like sailboat moment.
yeah.
They
So
like
that was
openly were
like
talking about it.
yeah, they had planned this trip, and it's funny too because I guess they had this other trip coming up, I think in a couple weeks, where they're both going to some family beach house.
Yeah.
But I think they both anticipated that was when each or somebody was going to propose.
Right.
So like they kind of
They're like,
all
I'll
were
beat
looking
you to it.
there for that to happen. So I thought like this would be a great time now. Before then, like each in their own head thought this would be a great
Right.
time to propose because like it might happen then, kind of thing.
Yeah. 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 So they're like, I'm gonna go first. I'm gonna be on the
I'm gonna
boat.
go first. And meanwhile, they did it at the exact same time.
Another question we got is like in these like proposal plannings or engagement shoots is how much involvement do you have in the planning? And I know you mentioned you don't do as many proposal shoots, but I think it ties right into engagement shoots too. Like, are you like do you enjoy when clients bring a vision to you? Obviously, these girls, like they're not from Charleston. So like,
Yeah,
did you have any sort of like research that you helped them with or even engagement shoots along the way? Because I know that Charleston is such a destination. So
sure.
people who are doing their engagement shoots, do you bring them along for a ride of like, this is where I like to take photos, or do you let them lead that process?
Yeah, it's definitely a collaborative effort. I think if they, because I do a lot of engagement shoots kind of all over the place, but if they choose Charleston, I have like a big body of work to kind of show them like here are different spots around town that like this
Yeah.
is how the light behaves here, this is how the light behaves there. Like if you want to do downtown and then the beach, like here are a couple of spots that I would suggest to do. But if they have like some meaningful place around town that like has some deep connection with the relationship, like obviously
Right.
that's where we want to start. So if they got proposed somewhere, we want to incorporate that. Or if they just love like Chalmers Street or the Battery or whatever, like we're going to use that as well. So it's definitely a back and forth, but a lot of my clients will lean on me as far as like scouting and
Yeah.
finding a great spot to shoot. Definitely when it comes to Charleston, but also kind of anywhere else too. But it's definitely
Yeah.
like a big back and forth getting up to it because I mean we all want the same thing. Like obviously I want to give them the best possible images, and especially if it's something in Charleston, like I've it's basically my backyard, so I have a big wealth of images and like
Right.
inspiration to show them.
Yeah. So in that, so in part of this planning process and finding a photographer for clients, and what do you think is like the best way to review a photographer's work for a client from a client's perspective? Is it, obviously Instagram is so photo heavy, like are people finding you via Instagram and then your website? Do you share full galleries with people?
Oh
How do you
yeah.
kind of go through that process?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram is definitely a huge source of inquiries for me. I think it's probably the same for a lot of photographers out there, just because the platform is so geared to our industry. I mean, it's all images, so it's pretty easy for me to be present on that social media.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, definitely Instagram is a big source of referrals. And I forget the last part of your question too. What were you saying?
Is like, so if people are finding
Oh,
you via
yes.
Instagram, and then like what's the next step basically?
Right.
How are you
So
showing them your work?
yeah, so I think once they find me on Instagram, they usually bounce to my website. I don't get a lot of like direct like DMs from Instagram. It's usually like they find me on Instagram, they go to
And
my
that's
website and then contact me through there. And then I always really prefer when people ask. Some people don't, but like I love showing full galleries because I feel like that's a big representation of like what they would be getting post their own wedding.
yeah.
So every photographer is obviously going to put their best foot forward when it comes to their Instagram and their website. So it's important, I think, for a client to understand like from start to finish, like how is he going to see the day? How does he incorporate moving light in different lighting scenarios, inside to outside, to rain, to heat, to whatever. And I feel like as a wedding photographer, that's kind of like the most important thing that you need to be flexible with. It's just like the ever-changing conditions, and
Right.
it's just like a roller coaster of a day. So to be mindful of that and present in the moment and just kind of like be able to kind of like roll with the punches and not be stressed if you're like outside and need to go inside or vice versa. So yeah, I always love when clients ask me for full galleries because I feel like
Yeah.
that's an important part of that piece.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think it tells the story. I think some people can forget about like detail shots of like, oh, like your mom looking at you from across the room
Right,
and things like that. Like those certain moments that you're like, oh no, like I don't think we need somebody to take photos of us getting ready. And it's not, those getting ready moments of like somebody putting mascara on you.
right,
It's those moments that are happening behind the scenes, even behind the scenes to the client themselves.
yeah,
So I think it's nice to see those full galleries. And then I know that also during the inquiry phase, for me, like when I'm recommending photographers for clients, I always recommend a Zoom call so that they can meet them. And I do not often participate in those Zoom calls because I
right,
think that a client's relationship with a photographer is very sacred. I think they're going to spend a lot of time with each other, and they should get along with each other. Like they should enjoy the photographer's aesthetics and everything, but they should also enjoy the photographer's personality. And
sure.
so do you find it helpful? Like how do you enjoy kind of like being vetted from the client? Is that something you really like take some time with before a hire? Or how does that work? Especially clients who are coming from planners.
Yeah, no, definitely. All of that. I mean, if we don't do an engagement session, like by far, we'll at least schedule a Zoom, if not a phone call, because, like you said, like I am around the couple more than anybody else in the entire wedding. So like the planner will kind of come in and out, but like from start to finish, like it's the photographer and the videographers are with the couple the most. So having that level of trust and having that kind of personal kind of connection is paramount in my opinion, because I mean I also like I always joke like I'm a photographer slash therapist, but like I kind of am. Like a lot of times like I'm the one who's there like, hey, everything's gonna be okay, like da, 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 da.
You're like running
So
that dance scene. Yeah.
yeah, and like it's so funny, like I always say to my wife like there's for sure that like that wedding hangover that everybody has like afterwards, like your body is just drained from just being the
Mhm.
physicality of it, but like it's more like the performative aspect of it for me too. Like you have to be like da 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 da, like everything is great, like la la la
Yes.
la. So like you have to like be. I always feel like a different person on a wedding day because I'm like everything is great, everything is awesome. Let's like all
Right.
problem solve and get through this together. And that's so important for a couple because this is a big day for them obviously too. So to make sure that like I'm putting them in the right headspace and like
Absolutely.
maintaining that throughout the day isn't super important.
Yeah, I think that's so important too, is that just like you said, these photographers, videographers, you're spending so much time with them from the client's perspective that it is somebody who's so important that one, you understand the full flow of the day and you're
Yeah,
there to do your job, but you're also there to be like supportive and, you know, you'll get a briefing on family dynamics and things like
yeah,
that, which are, so important of like who maybe can't have family photos next to each other and
yeah,
all of those things you need to kind of have in your wheelhouse and remember, throughout the whole day. So
sure.
mentally can be a little draining. So those Sunday rest days are important for sure. Okay, well, let's move into a little bit of like the planning process before you get to the day. Is we've talked about doing these Zooms and working with these planners. How do you feel like is the best way that you collaborate with planners? Like, do you have questionnaires? Like, are you doing calls? Like, what is the process that you're using that you feel has been effective?
Definitely calls. I don't really have like a big questionnaire that I send out. Um, I feel like planners who refer me either have some sort of like idea of who I am or know me
Mhm.
personally, or like just have a general vibe about like my aesthetic and like my
Yeah.
personality. So there's already usually kind of like a relationship that's kind of a little bit started at that point. So I guess from like the planning perspective, there's a lot of back and forth as far as like timeline, obviously, and like what will work best with lighting and sun, like where, different things will happen, like first looks and portraits and yada, yada, yada. But for the most part, like there's not a ton of back and forth with me and planners before weddings. It's more just kind of like the logistics
Mhm.
and then kind of like a brief, like how I like to best work versus like how they like to best work too, and like what they usually look for detail shots and like how they like to structure that. If they want to section off a time or if it's just like I got to make it happen when it happens kind of thing. So I definitely always love working with planners that uh, not put photography first, like have that kind of like in their
Yeah.
like in their sites most of the time too. Like
Yep.
so they are really invested in like getting the best images, not just for them obviously, but also for the clients
For
too.
the
Make sure
client.
here's time during golden hour. We want to take the couple out here. Here's a chunk of time for you to do just details. So we have that in the can. It's not like
Yeah.
one of us is running around to do details while the other person does cocktail hour and so on and so forth. So when people when you have that collaborative effort beforehand, it's always just going to make for the best end all product anyway.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. That's something that like the Maven House team is we are all very keyed in on, when a client books their venue and books their date, one of the first things on our timeline is when sunset. So then we're
Yeah.
backtracking to like, when are we doing these golden hour photos, and kind of making sure, okay, if you have to leave dinner to do the golden hour photos, is it happening in one of those transition moments when the salads are being cleared and the entrees are going down, and it doesn't feel
Mhm.
like it's a full interruption of the day. But obviously these photos are I mean, the photos and the videos are the thing that live on after the wedding day.
Right.
So making sure that throughout a full production timeline and the event timeline, the photography is really keyed in on that. Would
Yeah.
you say that you're working with clients who are mainly working with planners?
Yeah. It's been a
Yeah,
long time since I've done a wedding where there
just with,
wasn't someone
yeah,
involved.
that's
Yeah.
kind of like more client led for sure.
Yeah.
And then so throughout this planning process, obviously you've like talked to the client in some way. What is your stance on engagement sessions? And then for you, on top of that, engagement sessions for your destination clients, kind of how do
Mhm.
you go about that logistically?
Yeah. So I always love doing engagement sessions. I feel like I said before, if we're not doing that, then I definitely will do a Zoom call. But I feel like doing an engagement session is beneficial for so many reasons. Like like we all get to meet each other, so there's already that kind of personal connection where we can kind of like see face to face how we interact, and like get
Mhm.
them get to meet me and like my personality. But also it's like really helpful, I think, for couples too to kind of start to feel comfortable in front of the lens too, because like a lot of people, I mean, the last time they got professionally photographed like may have been like their high school yearbook photo. So this is
Yeah.
like something that's like not comfortable for most people.
Hmm.
So to have that like initial kind of like, here's how I like to direct and pose, and here's how I like to see you guys interact, and blah 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 blah, and like get a feel of like their own love language and like how they interact with each other. Like it's super helpful for me too, because then I know how much I need to interject and how much I can just stand back and let them be them. So engagement sessions kind of check all those boxes. I feel like, well, I would say more than half of my clients will include an engagement session.
Yeah.
And the ones that don't will definitely have some sort of Zoom call or something beforehand.
Absolutely. And so these clients that aren't doing an engagement session for whatever reason, maybe it's distance or whatever, they're not into the engagement session, how do you recommend a camera shy person prepares themselves like for having this photographer like around them all day? I think it can be a little jarring for people to wrap
Yeah.
their head around.
I definitely don't interject much. I definitely like shoot it a very photojournalistic kind of fly on the wall way anyway. And I think a lot of people, at least the clients that I have, find me and are attracted to my work because they see that in the images. So I think that for somebody who's a little more introverted or like a little camera shy, I will always like do my best to read the room, obviously, and just kind of like know what's going to work best for everyone. But yeah, if there's not an engagement session for those people, I just kind of like I do a lot of like performance is the wrong word, but kind of like a lot of like helpful image like words and stuff to kind of get them feeling excited, and like
Yeah.
I will do anything it takes to kind of like coax out some sort of like reaction, whether it be
Yeah.
like laughing or like them feeling, because even like sometimes like the awkward moments between a couple can learn like lead into like this is so ridiculous, this is so
Right.
funny,
Right.
and they just innately start laughing amongst each other, and that becomes an image in itself.
Exactly.
So I do a pretty good job, I feel like, reading each couple's like love
Mhm.
language, is what I always say, like how they kind of like touch and how they move together and how comfortable they are with like being emotional or being physical or kissing or whatever. And then kind of like that will steer a lot of it just to kind of see how they interact with each other.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something to bounce back to. Like, you're the photographer, but you're also like coming in from this like mental therapist standpoint of
Yeah.
like really understanding personalities, moods, and
Right.
all of those little minute details that nobody's talking about, but you're able to notice and kind of work
Right.
around.
Yeah.
Um, and so then in regards to also planning and all of these, and a little bit back to booking, but for you, when you're doing these destination events and shooting, how do you plan to photograph places that you haven't been to? And like, are you arriving a day early and doing some scouts? Like, how are you doing that research beforehand? And especially if it's a venue you haven't been to that like the client is like, yeah, we're bringing you in. So like, we want to make sure you know enough about this spot to photograph it how we want.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a lot of research before I go to the wedding, like
Mhm.
Google image search, just to kind of see like how other photographers have shot it. And then leading up to the day, like I will 100% show up at least 2 days before the wedding, just to kind of walk the grounds and see how the
Mhm.
light behaves, see like what spots are best around certain times, like the ceremony will be happening, like being there at the same time that things will be happening the next day or the day after. So I kind of like know like how the sun is going to work,
Yeah.
how each spot's going to look essentially for portraits or a ceremony or whatever. So definitely at least 2 days before the wedding, I'll show up and kind of like scout and get an idea, lay of the land, take some scenic shots too to kind of sprinkle that in for everyone
Mhm.
later. Um, and then, yeah, I think that's super important because like, and also I feel like people hiring destination photographers, I think they innately get a little timid because it's somebody who may not have been to that place before.
Right.
But in my opinion, and this is just coming from me, but like I always feel most creative and most excited when it's somewhere that it's new.
Yeah.
And like, not to throw shade on Charleston, but like I've shot every venue here a million times. So like I kind of know it becomes a little robotic, which is great in some ways and it's not great in others too. Like I know how the light's going to behave in every spot around town. But when I get to a new spot, like I'm just like all neurons are firing. I'm like, this
Right.
is exciting. This is exciting. So I think that to put a couple's mind at ease, that's kind of like a benefit to having somebody who's like seeing it for the first time with fresh eyes too.
I feel the same exact way. And that's what I talk to clients about all the time when we're doing venue searches. And it's, okay, well, you don't live in this area or you don't, have you worked at this venue before? And it's like, no, but your other, you could be talking to somebody who works at that venue every other Saturday and they want you to
Right.
put the bar in the same exact spot because that's what they've done. Whereas,
Yeah.
just like it is, you're walking in with fresh eyes and you're able to see that space in a totally new way that is even more personalized. And those clients' wedding photos and that client's wedding is happening at this venue that maybe produces weddings all the time, but it's a totally different wedding because you're bringing in fresh eyes in all sorts of different perspectives.
Yeah. I've definitely done a few like destination weddings where like people at the venue are like, I've never seen anybody use that spot before. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Why? This is
Why?
awesome.
It's so perfect. Why wouldn't you? And it's what it is. It's people sometimes get comfortable in doing what they're used to, and that you just need somebody new with fresh eyes to pop in and get creative in the space.
Yeah.
Okay, so diving a little bit more into the day of, and then we'll go a little bit into kind of after weddings, is are there any kind of foolproof things and foolproof shots that you are always going to for your couple? So like poses or like anything, like do you recommend first looks or like walking down the aisle is the first moment? Anything that you recommend from the photographer's point of view?
I try to be as like limber as I can and
Yeah.
not like really impose too much on that kind of thing. If couples ask like if I prefer doing a first look over the other, I'll tread very lightly into kind of like suss them out like which they
Mm,
would like to do first.
right.
Because a lot of people who ask that like already kind of have an idea of what they want to do, but like they just need a little nudge in one
Little
direction
push.
or the
Yeah.
other. So I personally like doing first looks more just because it's just such a more intimate moment. And I feel like a lot of people who are introverted or a little camera shy can kind of shake off all that stuff. Like just seeing like your
Right.
person, like just, I don't know, it just makes that whole dynamic just so much more calm when you can like, here's the person that I'm going to marry. And you see that, you get all that kind of like nervous tension out of the way before the ceremony. So like that's so important for couples who are especially like in that introverted kind of mentality to begin with, because then they kind of don't have to worry about that all eyes on me kind of thing when the doors open and she walks down the aisle or whatever. But I'll, like I said, like if a couple really wants that traditional, like I see them for the first time as the doors open and she walks down, like that's a beautiful moment too. So I'm not gonna push really in any direction, but like I personally like first looks a little bit better just because logistically it makes everything like go a lot smoother. You get that beautiful intimate moment with the two of them, and then the million of photographers that are around them too.
Right, exactly. Everyone with their exactly.
I know first looks are always so funny because they think it's this like little thing, then like they look back and there's like two of me, like I have two photographers with me and like a videographer crew over there, so it's like paparazzi just swarming them.
Yeah. I think also when, for me, my clients who are not doing a first look, I always push them to have an hour and a half cocktail reception, so that, you know, it's like, okay, well, you're not doing the first look, so you're really going to be using a good chunk of your cocktail reception for photos, whereas you've also done a tasting and you've chosen all of this food and you've chosen the musicians that are going to be part of your cocktail hour, and you want to be part of that. So it's like you don't need to sacrifice one thing for the other if you're not doing the first look. And I think it's just working with people who are able to, you know, see photos as a priority, but also not forget that like everyone has to eat. My background is in catering, so like food is as equal of a priority for me. So, and especially if people aren't eating throughout the day too. I mean, Team Maven House is always talking about food and making sure people are fed. So
that's good though. That's what like most people's takeaway. If not at the like every guest there is going to be talking about the food, and the couple will be talking about the photos or whatever. So food is important.
So you've got to have that balance between the two. Okay, and this is another one. So I feel like I've been seeing people who are doing either no wedding party or like one person on either side, or they're doing the big, there's like 12 people on either side. How do you go about like wrangling these big groups?
So I have a big voice when I need to, and I can like make sure that everybody kind of snaps their attention. If that doesn't work, I always will kind of like designate one groomsman or one bridesmaid to kind of be like my bully, basically, like bouncer, and just grab everybody together. So I'm very used to, because like just innately being down the South, I feel like it's very common to have like big bridal parties. So I'm kind of used to having like a big entourage of people that I have to just corral and herd into one spot. But I also like know that that's everybody's least favorite part of the day. So I'm always like very cognizant of that and try to be as fast as humanly possible. So I'm like, guys, just give me like literally like 7 minutes and we'll be done with this. If you could just like
focus in real quick.
Look at me, and then we'll be done. You guys can go back to drinking or doing whatever you're doing. Just like give me 10 minutes, please.
Give me this time real quick. I always saw those people that were pulling in to support like the camp counselors. And I'm like, okay, you guys are in charge right now. You've got to make sure everyone's together, everyone's here, focused in. We'll crank these photos out, and then you'll go back to partying.
Yeah, maybe I should just get a whistle, and that'll be part of it.
Exactly.
Check off all that camp concert.
Yeah, be like, when you hear the whistle, like eyes on me. You have to like revert back to like kindergarten, like clapping back at people. Okay, so then, I mean, we have the wedding day, we have all of these, and we're wrapping up, people, I promise, but I feel like this has been such a fun conversation. We wanted to go a little over our time here, but we did get a question about kind of, it's kind of related to post-wedding day, but like a little bit on publication. And do you feel like it's necessary to be published in order to book high-end clients?
No, I don't think so. It definitely helps. I mean, there's no doubt about that, but I think if you just put your best work forward and always kind of like be like mindful of like where your goals are. So if you're looking to be in the luxury destination or whatever, to make sure that you're presenting those images. And it doesn't like have to be through publication. I feel like I've gotten a lot of traction from just doing a good job reaching out to planners and like building those relationships more than just like making sure that everything is submitted always. Because I think just the nature of the beast with submissions too, like you'll get no's more than you'll get yeses too. So if you don't get a ton of work submitted or even published throughout the year, like you'll still, if you do a good job, like just being a good person with planners and like making sure like you leave on a good note with them, and then they will hopefully refer you to other jobs, and then hopefully they'll refer you to other planners, and then the ball kind of rolls from there.
Yeah.
So, and I always just tell other photographers to like be patient too. Like this doesn't happen overnight. Like, I mean, I'm 9 years in now, and I feel like I've done a pretty good job for myself, but like, it didn't happen in two. Like it
Yeah.
took a lot of like grassroots and kind of like building from the ground up too. So
I know.
publications, while they're great, like they definitely help, but they're not gonna like make or break anybody, I feel like.
Yeah, I think the patience is key. I know from my perspective, like I love meeting new photographers. I love meeting new vendors across the board. And I always feel bad where I'm like, oh, I love you, but like I don't have a client for you right now. But
Yeah.
that's not to say 6 months from now I won't. And like
Yeah.
then I can pull you in and I can refer you and do these things. So I think the patience is definitely key, and just making sure that you stay relevant enough, but like not for like crossing that line of annoyance almost
Right.
in like these
Yeah, no,
connections
totally.
with other vendors, to just be cognizant of like the way this industry works, which is it's working years in the future. In the
Mhm.
present, you're working way far ahead. So I
Totally.
think that it's something that you have to be cognizant about when you are trying to network and meet new people. And so, okay, last question, I think, unless people want to tag in some more questions, but I'm curious. So when you started 9 years ago, I'm assuming you really like honed in on Charleston, and then you were connecting with planners and all these things. Like, how did you start that journey to allow clients to like recognize you as this destination professional, and to see you as, okay, yeah, this guy lives in Charleston, he does the Charleston thing, but I'd be fine with him like photographing my like Palm Springs wedding or whatever
For
it may
sure.
be. And like how'd you grow your business in that direction?
It was a lot of things, and I think it had a lot to do with that I've lived in a lot of different places. So before I lived in Charleston, I was in California. So I kind of have these like little roots kind of all over the place. And then I grew up in New England, so I know a lot of people in different places, and I think that kind of helped when they had friends getting married, and then they had friends getting married. So it kind of like from the very beginning was kind of like doing weddings for friends in different places, which was great because like it's people that I knew, but it was also great because it kind of showed that I had the ability to travel, and I could publish destination work, and I can show that on my website. So, and I'm not gonna lie, like a lot of it's luck too. I feel like anybody who like is in any kind of business and doesn't attribute at least a little bit to luck, like is doing themselves a disservice, because
Right.
there's a little bit of luck involved in everything. And I think that was part of it too. And like I said, like just leaving everyone that you encounter on the wedding day with like a positive
Mhm.
remembrance of me is always like my most important thing, really, because like that's your lifeblood. It's just being remembered as like someone who was easy to work with, who rolled with the punches, who delivered great work. And if you can check all those boxes, then like those things will start to kind of just like naturally kind of propagate, and you'll get to more people, and your little tentacles will start spreading out everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And so on that, what does 2022 look like for you? Where are you heading? Where are you working? Has your season already started?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, you're in it. You're in
yeah.
it.
Yeah, I mean, I've already traveled a lot, but I feel like Charleston in itself, I mean, the season is so long. I mean,
Yeah.
I have weddings in January. It kind of takes what I always call like halftime, like July, August, like nobody wants to get married down here, as they
It's
should.
hot.
It's just,
It's oppressive down there.
it's a good way to like lose friends, basically, if you
Yeah.
want to invite them to your wedding here.
Yeah, you invite the people you don't want
Yeah.
to like be friends with forever to your wedding in Charleston in July.
It's just a group of enemies that you've
Yeah,
invited
exactly. You're like, come on
to really
down.
solidify that we don't like each other. So yeah, I've already had been to a lot of places already. Like I was just in Santa Ynez, California, and I always love going back to California just because it's got a big piece of my heart still out there.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the year, I go to Italy in the summer, and then I go to Florida a couple times, in Nashville. I'm all mostly like in the U.S. this year.
Yep.
But yeah, kind of all over the place. So I'm excited.
I love it.
But yeah, it's already been a crazy spring and it'll be a crazy fall too.
Yeah, so it's going to be an adventure for sure. This season's going to be really fun. I'm so excited to follow along on Instagram, your travels and your adventures. So I think with that, we'll wrap this up. I know we went a little over our time, but I really appreciate everybody for sticking around. I know that this was such a fun conversation for me. I hope for you too, Clay.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to wrap up a little bit with a quick note that always Maven House, we have many lead planners throughout the East Coast, and we offer free 30-minute consultation calls. So if you have any questions about your planning and you're thinking about hiring a planner, please feel free to reach out to us. You can find us on Instagram at mavenhouse_events. I am found on Instagram at Lindsey_events, and Clay is at Clay Austin. So again, we are so thankful for you tuning in, and thank you, Clay, for joining us. This was so much
Thank
fun.
you guys.
I feel like I could have talked for like another hour, like turned this into like a happy hour situation and just
We'll do a part 2
wine with you. I can't wait to come to Charleston and visit and see everything and hopefully meet up with you. Not in the months of July or August, but at a different time. So thank you everyone so much. We will be emailing out, I believe, a link to this via YouTube, and we'll share that link also on social media, so you can always find this. This will live on via YouTube. So thanks again, everyone.
Thank you guys.
All right. Bye, everyone.